Stamatis Moraitis, 98 years old, a small island in the Aegean Sea called Ikaria. Every morning he bent over his vineyard, every afternoon he lay down, and every evening, near the end of the day, he drank a cup of tea made from wild herbs he picked from the hillside above his house. In 1976, American doctors told him he had 9 months to live. Lung cancer, terminal. He was living in the United States at the time, and he had 9 different physicians confirm it. So he moved back to Ikaria to die among his people. He stopped treatment, he started planting, he lived for 35 more years. When journalists eventually tracked him down and asked how he explained it, he shrugged and said, "I just forgot to die." Now, before you file that away as a charming story about an exceptional man, stay with me. Because Stamatis was not exceptional on Ikaria, he was ordinary. 1 in 3 Ikarians lives into their 90s. The island has nearly 10 times the number of centenarians per capita compared to the United States. They experience roughly 20% lower rates of cancer, 50% lower rates of cardiovascular disease, and rates of dementia so low that researchers initially assumed their data collection was flawed. 8 to 10 more years of life than the American average. Disability-free. The question isn't why Stamatis survived. The question is what is in the water, or rather, what is in the tea, on that island. Here is why this matters to you personally. Nearly half of all adults in the United States currently have high blood pressure. Not pre-hypertension, hypertension. That's the CDC's own number from 2023. Same country, same air, same hospitals, radically different outcomes on a small Greek island most people couldn't find on a map. Today, I'm going to show you 3 specific things the Ikarians do every day that researchers almost dismissed as background cultural noise. The first is a tea protocol. Exact herbs, exact preparation, exact timing. And why the version most people buy in a bottle is not the same thing at all. The second is what goes into that tea, and why the temperature at which you add it matters more than the ingredient itself. And at the end, I'll tell you the practice that the lead researcher on the Ikaria study called the single strongest independent predictor of cardiovascular survival on the island. It is so simple that it almost didn't make it into the paper. But before I tell you what the Ikarians do, I need to tell you what they don't do. They don't take supplements. I know that sounds obvious, but I want you to sit with it for a moment because we have built an entire industry around the assumption that you can isolate the active compound in a plant, put it in a capsule, and get the same result. In 1996, a team led by Dr. G.S. Omen published findings in the New England Journal of Medicine from a trial called CARET, the beta-carotene and retinol efficacy trial. 18,314 individuals at high risk for lung cancer were given isolated antioxidant supplements, beta-carotene and vitamin A, pulled from the same foods that population studies had linked to lower cancer rates. That logic sounds reasonable. It is wrong. The trial was stopped early. The supplement group showed a 28% increase in lung cancer incidence and a 17% increase in total mortality. The isolated compounds, without the surrounding food matrix, without the cofactors, without the fiber and the polyphenols and the hundreds of compounds that travel together in a whole plant, they didn't just fail to protect, they caused harm. Americans spend over $30 billion annually on synthetic anti-aging supplements. The Ikarians spend roughly $5 a month on dried herbs. The protection does not come from the extracted compound, it comes from the whole system. And nowhere is that more evident than in the cup Stamatis drank every evening by his vineyard. The tea the Ikarians drink is called in Greek tsaitouvounou, mountain tea. It is not one herb. It is a rotating blend of wild sage, rosemary, and oregano, hand-picked from the hillside, air-dried in bundles and steeped in hot water at the end of the day. Here is what happens in your body when you drink it. The sage and rosemary contain a compound called rosmarinic acid. Rosmarinic acid does two things that matter profoundly after the age of 50. First, it acts as a mild, natural diuretic. It clears sodium and water from the blood through the kidneys, which lowers blood pressure without a prescription. Second, and this is the part that stopped researchers in their tracks, it acts as an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. That phrase sounds technical. Here is what it means in plain terms. Acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter most responsible for memory and cognitive function. As we age, an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase breaks it down. Rosmarinic acid slows that breakdown. This is the exact same mechanism used by modern Alzheimer's drugs like Aricept, the pharmaceutical version of what grows wild on an Ikarian hillside. In 2006, Dr. D.O. Kennedy's team at Northumbria University published findings in the journal Psychopharmacology from a controlled trial of 30 healthy participants. Administration of sage extract resulted in significantly improved cognitive performance and mood, specifically through this cholinesterase inhibiting pathway. Here is what that means after 60. Every cup of this tea is a mild, daily, whole food intervention for both blood pressure and brain function, simultaneously, at a cost of about 10 cents a cup. Now, a body check test. Think about what you had for breakfast this morning. Hold it clearly in your mind. Now, do you have dried rosemary or dried sage in your kitchen right now? Not a supplement, not an extract. The herb. If you don't, that is the only thing I need you to change today. One small jar. Your grocery store has it. This is where the protocol starts. Here is the preparation exactly as it matters. Boil 2 cups of filtered water. Remove the pot from the heat and wait 2 minutes. The temperature should drop to around 90 degrees Celsius or 195 Fahrenheit. Add 1 teaspoon of dried sage, 1 teaspoon of dried rosemary, and a pinch of dried oregano. Cover the pot and steep for exactly 10 minutes. This matters because covering it traps the volatile oils that would otherwise evaporate. Strain the herbs. Most people stop here and drink it plain. That's where the second tier begins. The most common mistake is boiling the herbs directly on the stove. Sustained high heat vaporizes the essential oils and makes the tea bitter. You steep, you don't boil. In the first 3 to 5 days, what you are likely to notice is a mild increase in urination, the natural diuretic effect clearing sodium. And in the late afternoon, a subtle mental clarity, not a caffeine sensation, the absence of brain fog. Don't expect a transformation, expect a quieter afternoon. Now the amplifier. Researchers studying the Ikarian diet noticed something that didn't fit the standard model. This population consumed honey every day, stirred into their tea, drizzled over yogurt, eaten alongside walnuts. And yet their metabolic markers didn't reflect the blood sugar dysregulation you'd expect. How did a population that sweetened everything with honey manage to maintain such stable cardiovascular and metabolic profiles? The answer is in the honey itself, but only if it hasn't been heated. Ikarian honey is dark, raw pine or thyme honey from local bees. It contains an enzyme called glucose oxidase, which produces slow-release hydrogen peroxide, giving the honey potent antibacterial properties and a quiet, sustained gut healing effect. It also contains oligosaccharides, which act as prebiotics, feeding the beneficial bacteria in the gut. Its glycemic index runs around 55 to 60, lower than refined sugar, and because it's fructose heavy, absorption slows further. Dr. C. Chrysohu's team published findings in the Hellenic Journal of Cardiology in 2010, drawing from 142 participants in the Ikaria study. Daily consumption of polyphenol-rich local foods and teas was directly associated with improved endothelial function, the elasticity of the vessel wall, arteries that stay supple rather than stiffen. Here is the supplement trap version of this story. The industry saw the antimicrobial data on honey, extracted the hydrogen peroxide mechanism, and put it in a pill. The extract removes all of that, the oligosaccharides, the local pollen, the amino acids, the enzyme synergy that only exists in the whole food. Most U.S. grocery honey has already been pasteurized, boiled at temperatures that destroy every enzyme in the jar, turning it into liquid sugar with a heritage label. You want raw, unheated, unfiltered honey. A farmer's market jar works. Authentic Greek pine or thyme honey is available online for $15 to $25. Here is the critical step that most people miss. You add the honey only after the tea has cooled to a drinkable warm temperature, below 40 degrees Celsius or 104 Fahrenheit. Honey stirred into boiling tea is honey that has been pasteurized in your own kitchen. The enzymes denature, the oligosaccharides degrade. You have just made expensive hot water 1 teaspoon after cooling, alongside a small handful of walnuts because the healthy fats help absorb the fat-soluble compounds in the herbs. This combination, mountain herb tea plus raw honey plus walnuts, is exactly what the Ikarian afternoon looked like. They didn't call it a protocol, they called it the end of the day. Subscribe to Dear Obachan. Every week we go deep on one zone, one practice, one system. Now I need to tell you about the thing the lead researcher on the Ikaria study almost left out of the paper. Dr. Christodoulos Stefanadis and his team at the University of Athens Medical School published the Ikaria study in Cardiology Research and Practice in 2011. They followed 1,420 permanent residents of the island, ranging in age from 30 to over 100. They were looking for dietary patterns, biomarkers, cardiovascular risk factors. What one researcher noticed, almost as a footnote, was that every afternoon, between 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock, the island stopped. Completely, shops closed, phones went unanswered. It was considered deeply rude to visit during this time or to make noise in the streets. Residents lay down for 30 to 45 minutes. Then they rose, drank their afternoon tea, and continued their day. The Ikarians call it mesimeri. It means midday. It is not a nap in the modern productivity sense, something squeezed between meetings or justified by a wearable device. It is a cultural institution, a daily biological reset built into the structure of the day. Dr. Androniki Naska's team at the University of Athens published findings in the Archives of Internal Medicine in 2007, before the Ikaria study itself, from a cohort of 23,681 healthy Greek adults followed for 6.3 years. Participants who took a 30-minute afternoon nap at least 3 times per week had a 37% lower risk of dying from heart disease compared to those who did not. Not 10% lower, 37%. Here is the mechanism. Your body runs two nervous systems in a daily cycle. The sympathetic, fight or flight, cortisol, inflammation, and the parasympathetic, repair, restore, digest. The modern 9 to 5 structure holds the sympathetic system active all day without release. Cortisol accumulates, and sustained cortisol exposure does one specific thing to your blood vessels. It damages the endothelial lining, the single cell layer that keeps your arteries smooth and flexible. The afternoon rest doesn't just feel good, it physically patches that damage. It resets the HPA axis, the hormonal regulation system, and restores vagal tone, the parasympathetic brake that the body needs to repair itself. The wellness industry's response to this knowledge was to sell adrenal fatigue supplements, $400 wearable stress trackers, and meditation apps. The Ikarian response was to close the door and lie down. The open loop I planted at the beginning of this video, the one ingredient I told you I'd save for the end, isn't a food, it isn't a herb, it's rest. Structured, protected, daily rest, not as a luxury, as a biological requirement. Here is the full system as one daily rhythm. Tier 1, the mountain herb tea, dried sage, rosemary, and oregano. Steeped, covered for 10 minutes in water that has come off the boil. This is the blood pressure intervention and the cognitive maintenance protocol, both at the same time from the same cup. Tier 2, raw, unheated honey. 1 teaspoon, added after the tea has cooled. This is the gut healing layer, the prebiotic, the anti-inflammatory signal that travels through the gut wall to the vascular system. Tier 3, mesomery, 30 minutes, every afternoon, not negotiable. This is the cardiovascular insurance, the practice that closes the cortisol loop the morning opens. Total time investment, 12 minutes of preparation, 30 minutes of rest. It replaces nothing except the supplements you no longer need. In 3 to 5 days, expect the diuretic effect and a quieter afternoon mental state. In 30 days, if you are tracking your resting blood pressure, you may see a shift. In 90 days, the practice is no longer a protocol. It is simply how your afternoon goes. We count milligrams of isolated supplements. They drink the whole herb. We add honey to boiling water. They wait. We buy stress trackers to measure our cortisol. They close the door and lie down. Stamatis Moraitis tended his vineyard until his late 90s. He napped every afternoon. He drank his tea by the vineyard wall when the light went low. He was not doing anything remarkable by the standards of his island. He was simply living the way everyone around him lived. Today, not this week, not after you've ordered the honey. Today, after this video, go to your kitchen and check whether you have dried rosemary and dried sage. If you do, boil water now. Remove it from the heat. Steep it covered. Wait for it to cool. That's it. That is the beginning. Which of the 3 practices are you going to try first? The tea, the honey, or the afternoon rest? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. The woman who forgot to die already knows the answer. Now, so do you.